You're about to watch me read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I think my expectations for this book are probably like around the middle because it doesn't seem like the most spectacular, unique kind of idea, but it sounds interesting nonetheless. And so I think maybe in the middle expectations because I don't expect it to blow my mind or anything like that, but I do expect it to be like fun and sorry, there's like a car and a bell going off at the exact same time there. I do expect it to be really fun though. I think kind of like Fourth Wind, like people have gotten mad at me in the past when I've said this, but so please don't actually get mad at me about this. But Fourth Wind itself was interesting and captivating, but it wasn't anything unique or new or super groundbreaking, but it was definitely a really fun read. And so I think that Powerless is going to be very similar to Fourth Wind in that regard. So from my understanding, this book follows our main character in Ordinary. And so basically what it seems like had happened, there was like a plague and certain people were gifted like magical powers. And these are like elites, I think. And so our main character doesn't have any of those powers. And so those people without powers are basically like shunned from society, and people with the magical powers are like amazing and the most incredible people you've probably ever met in your entire lives, and they're part of the elite. So like they're kind of like people who protect the kingdom. And so our main character, we know, doesn't have magic. I'm predicting that's probably not the case, but and she ends up saving the life of this prince, and because she does that, the prince wants to make her an elite because he thinks that she has the magic powers, and she ends up kind of getting wrapped up into this. And she doesn't have these magic powers. Again, I don't know if I really believe that. And so she's now fighting not only feelings for this guy, but also like fighting for her life, because you're supposed to be like showcasing your powers in these like tournaments, I think, that are happening to, and like tests and stuff to become a proper elite. And so that's going to be interesting. I'm honestly really excited to see like where it's going to go. It is kind of given Red Queen vibes. And so yeah, let's read this book. But wait, we know the drill. Hardcover, dust cover. Dust covers always come off before I read them. And sometimes it's a nice little design at the bottom. So let's hope that's the case. There's like sun in my eyes. Yes! Oh, this is what I like. Nothing makes me happier when there's a design. The book I just finished reading, The Reappearance of Rachel Price, also had a design. So this is 2 for 2 now. I am on a roll. So let's read this book. I'm more than 100 pages into Powerless, and I have a lot of thoughts. I can definitely understand like the hype behind this book, like why a lot of young adult people are really interested in wanting to read this, because to me, this is that generation's Red Queen and Hunger Games. However, that's not my issue with it. My issue with it is that it's literally Hunger Games, Red Queen fanfic. In a way, there are scenes that are directly plagiarized from both of those series, and you can definitely tell there was a lot of inspiration pulled from there. For instance, the way these characters meet, exact same as Red Queen. We have our main character who's like a thief. She steals from the prince gives her some money as well. Sure, that happens. I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like, that's not 100% copying. But for me, what really just like irked me was the dance scene. We know in Red Queen when Mare and Cal, they were practicing their dance moves together, and that exact same thing happened in here. And there was like no reason for our main character Paedyn to dance with Prince Kai. Like, he just kind of showed up and like they danced, and it didn't really make sense, but it was like a direct replica of Red Queen. There's a lot of pretty much replicas as well of the Hunger Games, especially in terms of like interviews, and even like the interview woman was very much like Effie, like appearance wise as well. So that was interesting. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff like that in here. And the same thing I've seen with Fourth Wind as well. There are definitely a lot of inspiration pulled from Red Queen, but The difference, I would say, is that the fourth one writing style was really, really good. And so the author really just kind of captivates you in there. And she wasn't just directly copying. You can definitely see that in Iron Flame. Like, the story is going into its own direction. All the characters, they're still different. And I think that that's really good. But the issue that I'm having with this one is that it doesn't seem to be doing that right now. At least like the 100-ish plus pages that I'm in this book right now. It's like a direct copy. However, with all of that said, I'm coming at this the perspective of a woman in my mid-20s. And so my generation, we had Red Queen, we had Divergent, we had Hunger Games. And it reminds me of when I talked to my sister, who's 10 years older than me. And this is when I first read Red Queen. And she, at the time, was my age, which I think is funny. And I remember telling her, like, Red Queen's amazing. Like, you have to read this. It's so good. And she read it and she was like, yeah, that reminds me of another book that I read. It wasn't shocking or surprising. And I was like, what? Like, super offended. So I think it's really interesting, the parallels, because I think that's what I'm experiencing right now. Because the younger generation, this is their Red Queen. And for me, I had Red Queen, and I don't know what was before what my sister had read that was similar to Red Queen. So that could be the case. Like, maybe it's just like my own biases. But it makes me feel bad because, like, this author definitely, like, she's a new author and she can definitely write. Like, I can tell that as I'm like reading the books. Like, she's not like Rebecca Yarros or Brandon Sanderson or Emily Henry, but she's a new author, and it's honestly really impressive that she wrote like 500 pages of a book, and like you can tell that she's writing and that the characters can interact. I definitely think there's a lot of potential with this author, but so far, like, it really just feels like a fan fiction of sorts of the books that, I don't know how old she is, she's probably my age as well, that she probably grew up with as well, and maybe she doesn't know that she's like accidentally copying. And so if this wasn't for my book club, I probably would have DNF'd it by now. However, it's for my book club and I gotta see it through. I've also just recently, like 10 minutes before I started recording this, I did Google to see if the book is completely copied, and a lot of people share the exact same opinions as me on this. And so it seems like the book does pick up later and starts to become its own thing, according to some of the reviews. Like, obviously I don't want to read the spoiler reviews because I don't want spoilers, but it seems like the first like half of the book is very, very similar, and then it seems like the next half like kind of becomes its own thing. And so if that's the case, I'm really excited for that. So I will continue to read this book and I will update you around the halfway point. So I'll see you then. So I'm now definitely more than halfway through Powerless, and it definitely does pick up and become less of a copy of Red Queen and Hunger Games, but it's still in there, but at least it's going in a different direction, which I'm like excited about. So what's happened so far is our main character, Paedyn, is basically, they're calling her the Silver Savior because she saved the life of Prince Kai because he was being attacked by a silencer, and silencers are pretty much like exactly what they sound like. They can silence all abilities. And so that's kind of like why she wasn't affected, because she doesn't have any abilities. And so she's able to like, psh, and she didn't realize who the guy was. So she ended up saving the prince. And because of that, everybody kind of sees her as like a hero. And so the town ends up signing her up for these trials. And that's kind of how she gets involved with the trials. And so she's like, oh, well, that sucks. But with the trials, everybody basically lives in the castle. And so she has a lot of interaction with like the Prince Kai character, his brother, and a bunch of other characters who are also taking part in the trial. And they all have like different unique abilities. There's like interviews and balls and the trials themselves. And so one of the trials that they did was like they were thrown into the forest for like a week. And there was like weapons and med kits and stuff that were kind of scattered about, and they can kind of like grab those. And the idea was to basically get like these armbands off of people. And so that was kind of one of the games that they played. And I think that it was pretty fun. I liked it. It was definitely very Hunger Games, but I think that I did enjoy just like the descriptions and how different it was from the rest of the book. So I think that scene was pretty good. And then there was also their capture the flag game that they played, which was, it was okay, but I like that it was different, which was good. I would have liked to see, going back quickly to the kind of like the forest thing that they did, I would have liked to see the author follow through with what happened to one of the characters instead of that character surviving. I think that it would have been more impactful and more like, whoa, like anybody can die kind of vibes. I think that would have been really good instead of just like that character not dying. That's just my personal opinion, but I think that would have added more drama to it, especially because of like who did that to that character. I think that would have just like made it like pretty good, to be honest. And so now we're kind of at the final trial. So that's where I am right now in the book. And there's like one final ball and then there's like one final trial, and nobody knows what the trials are until like they wake up and they're like in wherever the trial is. So our main character is also part of the resistance. So like Ordinaries who want to take over the elites. And so she's kind of like schmoozing with the future kin, who happens to be Prince Kai's older brother. And so that's again like a love triangle voice for everything, but that's okay, it's fine. Some people like love triangles, so it's just not my kind of thing. But she's basically like schmoozing with him so she can find like the hidden tunnels so she can bring her resistance people through so they can do like resistance people stuff and kind of like be like, we exist, we're not horrible, we're not diseased, like please stop killing us kind of vibes. And so yeah, that's where I am right now. However, I still don't care about the world or the characters or the situation, and I unfortunately don't find the banter or the tension that good. Like, it's a bit repetitive if I'm being honest, and like I'm somebody who's really easy to please too. Like, as long as you've got good chemistry and likable characters and good writing, like I'm good to go. I don't care like how similar it is. Like, I love romance stories, right, where it's just like the exact same formula over and over and over. So it's not that I mind the similarities or like anything like that. Like, I think that this new author, Laura Roberts, she can definitely write. Like, she's still like a new author. You can tell in the way that she writes and like she handles dialogue and characters and all of that, because the characters themselves, they're not too well developed and they don't really have too much of personality except for like one main aspect about them. Our main character, Paedyn, her kind of like personality is that she's stubborn and tough and not like other girls. And then we have Prince Kai, and his is that he's kind of like a broody but secretly sweet and caring kind of guy. And then there's like his brother Kit, who's just like a nice guy. And there's like Blair, who wants to marry into royalty and she's just like a mean girl. And then there's like the younger brother Jax, who can like teleport and stuff, and he's just like sweet innocent boy. But like there doesn't seem to be that much depth to any of these characters. And so I think that's what I am having a lot of trouble getting behind, because if you can't get behind any characters, then it really does make for a struggle. And again, like I don't feel like, I always feel icky when it's like a blatant copy of something else. And so luckily like that's kind of out of the way, so it's definitely easier to go through. And I did enjoy just like the scene of them in the forest and kind of mending the wounds and all that. So there's some good scenes in this book, and I can definitely understand like why it's so popular among the young adult crowd, but it's definitely not hitting the mark for me. But doesn't mean other people won't enjoy it that much. So I will update you when I finish this book, and I will have my final thoughts for you then. So see you soon. So I just finished Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and I definitely think as a first novel from this author, I definitely see lots of potential in there. And I think that in the next couple of years, when she really like hones in and crafts her writing, it's going to be really good. But this book I did not really enjoy at all, but I can understand the appeal for it, especially for people just getting into like fantasy. So like maybe teenagers or older adults. Really, it doesn't matter like your age, but if you haven't really had an exposure to fantasy, I think Powerless is like a good way to start, because there's not really that much world building. It's easy to get behind. It's chill, like you kind of go through things. If you haven't read Hunger Games or Red Queen, I think you'll really like this book, because it does tap into, like I said, it does kind of copy those other books. But if you haven't read those other books, then this would be like very fresh and new. And again, it's really, really easy to be as like one of those kind of gateway books to get you into fantasy. I think that there was some cute scenes in this book. I really liked when he was braiding Paedyn's hair. I thought that was a really cute scene. I also liked when he was having a nightmare and she kind of came to comfort him and they kind of like cuddled and stuff. Like, that was cute. There were some good scenes in there. I liked the first trial. I think that that was fun. I think that there could have been more to it, but I think that it was really fun to just kind of follow them around, and again, you're kind of learning a little bit more about the world. So yeah, those were the things that I did like about the book. I thought that it's a really great, like, it's hard to write a novel. Like, this is like 500 pages, and so it's super, super hard to write something like that. And so I'm definitely encouraging this author to continue because she definitely has the passion and the drive for it. And again, like, I think that in the future, she's gonna have some really, really, really good books that I'll probably be like sweating to buy. And I know that I can see that clearly. However, when it comes to my constructive criticism, I do have some. As I mentioned when I was first reading this book, it really, really, really feels like a very obvious copy of Red Queen and The Hunger Games. And so that always rubs me the wrong way. Like, I don't mind similarities. Again, I'm like an avid romance reader. That's the exact same formula over and over and over and over again. But it was just like so obviously copied. And then what was hard to enjoy is that I didn't enjoy or care about any of the characters or the relationships that they were building. So I think I would have given it some leeway if it still like copied those aspects. I think it would have been better if it changed it a little bit so it wasn't so obvious. And then make the characters a little bit better. And more world building. So I didn't know anything about the world. You kind of get a little bit, but like, what does the world look like? Is there a special currency that's being used? Are there different types of creatures? There seemed like maybe there could have been. There's like people with magical powers. So are there magical creatures there? What does it smell like? There was a lot of lacking of the sense of smell in the book. There was a lot of visual, there was visual, but it wasn't really that in depth. It was just like, here's like a stack of garbage. And it's like, I would like to know more about, like, maybe I'm just like really, really picky, but I want to really envision and imagine this world. I also want to understand about the purging and like, why are you taking these really, really strong people and killing them? Like, what is the purpose behind that? How is that going to help society? I want to know that. I want to understand that. I also want to understand, like, what's the history of that? Why do people, like, do they train their whole lives for this? Like, what does that look like? So I think there's a lot of untapped potential in this world that I would have loved to see expanded on more, because it's not like our usual human earth world. This is like a fantasy world. And so I would have loved to see, like, what kind of cool aspects does it have? Like, it was never described. What if the trees were blue? The trees could have been blue. You say trees, but what if they were blue trees? There are definitely, like I mentioned, with our main character, Paedyn, there are a lot of similarities between her and Mayor Barrow from Red Queen and Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games. There was even like, I feel bad because I knew it was coming, and I'm like, if this woman picks up like a bow and arrow when she's doing this like very Hunger Games kind of like first trial, I am gonna be annoyed. And I was annoyed because it was never really shown that she's like good with bow and arrow until like suddenly that part, but it seemed like she had like a more of a favorite weapon, and then I'm just like, okay, now she's just being Katniss, and it was really just like Hunger Games vibes that I was feeling, at least from that. And then of course we can't not talk about the similarities between like Cal and Kai and Blair and Evangeline, and even for the most part, not to the same degree, but Maven and Kit. Maven, I think, is just such an amazing character, though. I love Maven so much, but I also hate Maven, you know? And I can see the similarities with him and Kit. And then there's like the evil kin guy. There's like our main character who's a thief. She steals from the prince. Prince gives her money. She's like very special now. All the silver references, all of that. The other brother taking her to see the garden. The best friend / sister who sews stuff. Like, there's a lot of similarities that it's just like, it just kind of irks me. And in terms of like the characters themselves, they were very one-dimensional in my opinion. Like, we didn't really learn, like, we learned a little bit about their backstories, but not that much. The conversations they had were very like forced and fake, and it really didn't make sense to me like why both brothers were so obsessed with Paedyn. I get like how Kai can see like the interest in her because she saves his life kind of thing. That's instantly like, oh, like, who is this girl? But why the brother was so obsessed, I don't know. And then I also didn't like that Paedyn didn't really have any flaws. Like, she was like perfect. She could beat up everybody. She was like the most powerful fighter ever. Everybody loved her. She was beautiful, like all of this stuff. And like, it's just really unrealistic. I want characters with flaws. I want characters who aren't perfect. And I also don't want pick-me girls as my main character. And then I think that there was a really big missed opportunity with Paedyn and her best friend, because her best friend, she literally mentioned that she forgot about her best friend. It's like, how do you forget about your best friend? But also, there was a lot more telling than showing. They just kept on telling you about how great friends they are, like that they grew up together and all of this. They had like one or two memories that were shared in the book, but for 500 pages, like, you don't really learn a lot about this relationship. And so I didn't really care about that relationship. And honestly, I forgot about that character until like she comes back and then she does some stuff and then she leaves and then she comes back again. And imagine how more impactful it would have been if you really, really get to feel with the characters when they're with these people and establishing these relationships. I think that would have been really, really great. For Kai's character, I love the morally gray, broody man as much as any other person in this planet. But his character just felt too fake to me, unfortunately. And his overuse of the word darling, honestly, it gave me the ick. Like, it gave me the ick. He just was, I don't know. He just didn't feel realistic. I think he was a little bit too obsessed. I wanted to see more about, like, what else does he care about? Like, what does he do? Like, they kept on mentioning future enforcer, like, every second sentence that was involved with him. And so it was, the writing gets really repetitive like that, or a lot of, like, kind of bizarre comparisons, or like, she was beautiful, bold, brave, and it's like, yes, but like, do you have to say that like every couple of sentences? I think that there are other opportunities to explain these kinds of things, different ways to talk about characters, and instead of just telling us about how characters are bold, beautiful, and brave, I would love to see them be bold, beautiful, and brave. Those are my final thoughts on Lauren Roberts' Powerless, and so I will be giving it a total of 2 stars today. As you can tell, I did not enjoy this book. I really don't want to discourage this author at all, though, because she's got potential and the passion and the drive that I've mentioned. And so I gave it that extra little star because this is your first book, and that's amazing. I think that's so great. Like, that's so hard to do. You can write and write and write, but honestly, finishing the book and then publishing it is so hard. So I think that that's incredible. And I think that there's a lot of great things that are going to happen in the writer world, especially like with all these up and new coming writers, which is really great. I definitely will like read more of her books. Maybe not this year or the next year, but when she starts to kind of flow and get a little bit more of her craft down pat, I think I'll definitely pick up one of her books. So the next book that I'll be reading is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And so this is one of those books that I've been seeing all over BookTok. And so it's pretty much that traditional story, except it's a vampire and she ends up getting engaged to a werewolf, like an arranged marriage. And she's like some important woman, and I think he's a pretty important guy as well. So I am really honestly excited to see that because I love anything with like vampires and stuff in it. Like all that Twilight phase is just like boom, comes back to me as soon as I see a vampire, and I'm like, oh yes, vampires. Yeah, so that's what I'll be reading next. So if you're interested in watching me read Bride, Brandon Sanderson, or any other books that happen to be on my TBR, definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and turn on the bell notification. That way you get notified anytime a new video comes out. If you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I wasn't being too harsh, definitely hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!